This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider this, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bales Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome back to UNO. You know, the state is in sort of a collective angst over trying to deal with, and it depends on who you talk to, but a multi into the triple-digit millions of revenue shortfalls in the state. And certainly one of the places they're looking to cut budgets is the University of Nebraska system and its 4 campuses. We are honored at the University of Nebraska at Omaha today to have the president of the entire University of Nebraska system, L. Dennis Smith. Thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Dr. Smith, it doesn't really make any difference exactly how many dollars you're talking about, but there's some magic figure that has to be reached. And Governor Johanns has said he's going to stand behind a 3% across the board cut state budgets. And that would mean 3% for the state. Now, the Revenue Committee has pushed forward a plan that was passed by the unicameral and faces this next week the governor's probably pen that calls for only a 1% budget increase cut. But in dollar, what are we talking about in dollars? The dollars get so much. What's a 1%?
Well, a 1% cut in the plan approved by the Appropriations Committee is $4.4 million.
So 3% would be about $15 million.
Well, 3% is 3 times 4.4 million. That's
but these, you know, what is it? They used to say, well, when you get into this many dollars, you're talking real money. How much is real money to the university? You've seen your budgets grow, but you have goals to meet. What does just a 1% cut mean to the system?
Well, it's not just 1%. I think the important thing to emphasize is that as a result of the special session last fall, we've already taken a 2.5% cut.
So this would be 1% in addition?
This is 1% in addition to that. The total then for those 2 events would add up to about $15 million. The 2.5% cut has resulted or will result in the loss of about 140 positions at the university. We've reduced several programs, including distance education. We've cut out other programs or essentially altered them irreversibly, such as the Teaching and Learning Center.
Down in Lincoln.
So overall, this has an impact on the ability of the university to serve both its students and the citizens of the state.
Senator Roger Wirbine, who heads up that committee, has been concerned particularly about rural programs. Now, we tape this here at an urban university, and I think a lot of our viewers are urbanites, and they don't really understand that the rural mission is still very huge and very important to the future of the state. How is that jeopardized?
Well, I think it's fair to say that every program we offer will be subject to some form of jeopardy. We spend a great deal of time and effort on rural parts of the state. One of our major priorities is something called the Rural Initiative, in which we're developing approaches to try and help the rural economy. Those include things like extending telemedicine throughout the state, expanding distance education, instructing people in how to get involved with e-commerce, computer savvy technology, a whole series of things along this line. They require money. Simple example, John Allen, who is a professor at UNL, who heads the department or the program in rural affairs, has been going out into the state and teaching people not only how to use computers, but in small groups, how to get access to the web and how to get involved in electronic commerce. He apprised me of what he was doing. I thought it was an outstanding program, and I said, let's advertise it. Let's make it more widely available to people throughout the state. his response to me was, please don't.
He's got all he can handle?
I can't handle any more people. That's the kind of thing we need to enhance and really push to make people out in the rural parts of the state more accessible, to give them better opportunities for economic development, whether it be primary incomes or secondary incomes.
You know, that's maybe a good example of how perhaps a university mission and what a university does is sort of blurred with economic development and all kinds of things. In other words, the university takes over this job, but if they were to eliminate it, there's no guarantee, and it's necessary, I think, and I think most people would agree to the future of this state, is to get everybody connected, so to speak. But is that the university's job? And if the university didn't do it, would there be the money or would somebody initiate that program in, say, the Department of Economic Development or in some other measure in the state?
Our job is knowledge, the discovery of new knowledge, the dissemination of the knowledge we know, and we try to apply that to help the maximal number of people. The economy in this state, the economy nationally, is becoming a knowledge-based economy. The governor put in place a task force some time back to identify 6 targeted industries that the state needs to really concentrate on.
This was the governor?
This was the governor. Every one of those requires the active and full participation of a very strong University of Nebraska. We have been asked on many occasions by the director of the Department of Economic Development to step up to the plate and participate fully, because our participation is going to depend on whether or not those targeted industries really begin to excel. There has never been a time in which the university, not only this one, but across this nation, has been more important to economic development and well-being. So yes, it is not only one of our functions, it's a critically important function.
And in a sense mandated by the governor.
Mandated by the governor, by the Department of Economic Development, by the citizens of the state. All of the students we train and produce, all the ones we educate, will have to participate in that new knowledge-based economy. If we don't educate them, then we're either going to have to recruit them from out of state or simply not grow the economy. I can't imagine anything more important right now than the university.
Let's consider the fact that K through 12 in this state, the lower than university level educational institutions are facing and have faced huge cuts in terms of the property tax relief from the state. And a lot of folks feel that which is closest to home. So let's say there's a just darn big pool of parents out there that have more young kids than are university students themselves or have university students. You know, they're feeling the pain of that in the schools and with perhaps a shift back to their property taxes. Are you afraid they'll lose sight of the university, this overall mission that you just referred to? Because it's always what's closest to home that strikes you first in terms of your personal priorities?
I'm less afraid of that than I'm afraid that the state is losing perspective on the importance of education. All levels. We call it P16, pre-kindergarten through college. It's one seamless system. We all do the same thing in one way or another, and we all depend upon each other. The university and K-12 have come together as partners. We now have an initiative called the P16, an initiative. We're progressing to make education as seamless as possible. You can't separate one from the other. We do have different means of financing the two, and therein lies part of the discussion. Increasingly, the state has been funding P12, K-12, by using general fund tax dollars. Every time it increases to the K-12 level, it has to come at a decrease from somebody else who's funded from the same pool of money. So there are always trade-offs. My hope is that we can bring it all back together and make education the number one priority in the state, education for everyone. And if we do that, I have no worries whatsoever. Now, the way we're headed, if you decrease the university, you have the prospect that a lot of high school students graduating who are going to want to go to college won't end up going to the University of Nebraska. They'll go to college or university out of state. The probability of them coming back into the state is very much reduced than if they go to the university here.
I think most people agree with that. The question is does our university system, and then we have some state colleges too, does the university system do what in Senator Phil Erdman's words are, we have colleges competing for the same students and we need to manage that better. In other words, I guess he's implying that we have 3 universities in the state system, and of course the University of Nebraska Medical Center, Kearney, Omaha, and of course sort of the father institution, University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And are we competing for the same students in this state, and therefore maybe cuts can be made in those competitive realms as opposed to reinventing the wheel on every campus? Or does a university have to have certain things?
Well, certainly we compete. As a matter of fact, we compete for students with every major college and university in the country. Do you think Kansas and Iowa and Colorado don't come into the state of Nebraska and try and take away our best students?
They would if they're
and
smart.
we compete against them to not only retain our best students, but to recruit their best students. We live in higher education in one of the most competitive industries in the country. And if we don't compete, then after a short period of time, we're out of business.
So naturally, since we're competing with these other institutions to keep at least our own people here and perhaps grab some fertile minds from elsewhere, then just by token of doing that, we're going to be in competition with one another because
Absolutely.
we need to be competitive in general, even if we're freestanding institutions.
Well, if we can't compete with Iowa State to retain our best students and recruit the best students, then we certainly can't compete with Creighton or with some of the private schools or with the state colleges. And every one of the schools, private and public, tries to be good enough that students will pick them as their first choice. That's the nature of the business we're in.
The Board of Regents this week, coming up right after our taping, and we tape on Thursdays, Saturday, will consider and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't always get my figures straight, so we'll get this right, are going to consider the second part of a tuition increase.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
The Regents a year ago approved a 2-year tuition increase of approximately 10% each year.
For resident students?
For resident students. For out-of-state students, it's closer, as I recall, to 15%. So that's already been done.
That's already been done. Did you ever think about maybe asking for a little more? Maybe that second year?
Well, you have to consider what we did a year ago when we did it. The university did not share in the surplus tax dollars available through most of the 1990s. Our increase in budgets averaged a little over 3% from about 91 up to last year. We didn't have those 5, 6, and 7% increases in our budget that many other agencies and sectors in government received. Now, what happened last July, well, and actually before that, is that the governor and the legislature agreed to enhance the quality of the university by giving us a new infusion of funds. And part of that enhancement was to pay faculty salaries at a level which finally would begin to approach the average of what our peer institutions were receiving.
So that's just the middle?
That's just the middle. They gave us over 6.5% increases for 2 years in the budget. Now, what we did is go back to the Board of Regents and said that alone will pay the salaries and most of our fixed costs. But to really enhance quality, we still need additional funds. The 10 plus 10% tuition increase on top of the large state increase was to really bring the quality of this university up at least one notch and hopefully to a much higher level.
In terms of teacher salaries?
In terms of salaries, in terms of the quality of programs, in terms of reputation, in terms of a whole series of things. We have been wildly successful the last couple of years, maybe the last 3 years. We're recruiting more freshmen into our campuses. Their average ACT scores are up, in some cases by a full 2 points. Their grade point averages are up. Our retention rate from the freshman to sophomore year is up. Our graduation rate for the first time in some time is up. And every trend we're looking at is on the upswing. We're not only now retaining our best faculty, we're beginning to hire some of the most outstanding faculty in the country to our campuses. We are becoming a force to reckon with. What happened was we ran into a brick wall. The budget cuts have the potential to cut us to the extent that it essentially stops us in our tracks. My fear is that what gets impacted first is quality. Now, I don't know about you. When my kids went to school, even coming out of high school and going to a college, they wanted to go to one of the best ones. They didn't want to go to an average or a mediocre university. And I applaud them for that. I didn't want them to either. That's what we have to do. We have to maintain the quality of this institution at such a high level that the students in this state would pick the university as their first choice of where they want to go for post-secondary education.
You don't want to be an also-ran.
I don't want to be an also-ran.
Now, within the last few years, let's go 3-4 years back, and as I get older, I lose track of time. But the spotlight was on you for a while, from legislators, regents, the public in general. When rankings get thrown out, and they talked about your peer institutions and maybe how NU wasn't as high as it should be, and in and about that time, I'm not saying as a result of it, is when more talk says, okay, let's invest. Now that we're in a budget crunch, you want to be in the top 30 peer institutions.
I want to be among the top 30 public institutions.
Public institutions. So let's say UNL is in a tier.
Yes.
Of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. You want to be among the top 30. UNO is which is in kind of a different category. You want it to be in the top. Kearney to be in the top 30. Since we still might have a way to go in some of these areas, I suppose it's particularly saddening to think that the little progress you were making might be endangered.
It can take a long time to build a high-quality university. You can destroy it in a remarkably short period of time. What you do is cut the resource base. That sends a message to the faculty that there may be better places in which to undertake their careers. So some of your best faculty start leaving. As the faculty begin to depart, the quality and the reputation go down. Then the best students decide they don't want to come there anymore. They'd rather go someplace that's better. And so you see it spirals down. And that spiral can happen over a period of 3, 4, 5 years. We have reached the point where we're really on the upswing. We, I think, can achieve our goal within a relatively short period of time. And stop and think, every state has at least one public university. The goal to be among the top 30 simply says that this state ought to rank higher than 31 or 32. I not only think that's achievable, I think the people in the state really demand that we be best if we can possibly achieve it.
Okay, imagine I'm an imaginary state senator right now, and I say, I pick up the newspapers, and I see that every state is facing a very similar budget crunch. So although we want to remain competitive, we're all going to be cutting back on our university system. So at least we can remain competitive with one another, whatever relative ranking we are. Now, maybe we can't stay competitive with some of the private institutions, but then we read that Creighton, down the street from UNO, is no salary increases for their faculty this year. And so this imaginary state senator, which I am right now, says, hey, things are going to be on a hold all over for a while. So take your lumps.
Let me make 3 simple points. One, not every state is in the same boat. And a lot of states are providing more support than ever before for their universities and public colleges. Those turn out fortuitously to be some of the same states that come in and recruit our people away. So the competition is not uniform. In some cases, it can be very one-sided. Secondly, we got off at a lower point in the first place. Some states really poured a lot more money into their educational systems in the 90s. We didn't. And so the faculty salaries at those institutions already are much higher than what we were paying. It's
So
like
you're saying everybody's not standing still
everybody's
simultaneously?
not standing still simultaneously, and everybody didn't reach the standstill at the same point. My wife is a diehard Cubs fan. She's followed the Chicago Cubs for
I'll
decades.
pray for your wife.
They are not one of the top teams in baseball, at least they haven't been, but they're getting better and better. And they're doing it in large part by investing more money to be competitive. It is possible to do, but it does require resources. You can't become competitive, you can't become quality on the cheap.
Okay, so let's get back to where we started at the beginning, that the governor has proposed a 3% across-the-board cut. The Appropriations Committee has said 1%. The governor is going to get out his pen, I feel certain, and I think to some degree you do too. But you told the academic faculty on the Lincoln campus this past week that you believe the state also has to look at raising revenues to resolve these budget woes. And you suggested a summit to talk about Nebraska priorities. Number one, do you really think that we will raise revenues that much to offset, say, 2% of that 3% cut? And number three, I can't remember how many times we've called for summits in the state, or somebody has, and they never happen.
Well, there again are several answers to the 2 or 3 questions you've raised.
I sure did raise 2 or 3. You're right. Let's start with the governor's running, for governor again?
Yeah.
So there's some political realities in here instead of just the philosophical and realities of we don't want to raise taxes, and nobody likes to raise taxes. He's running for governor, and he's going to stand as firm as he can.
I'm not running for anything, by the way. So I think it's important for me to look at the university. That's my job, and I can see the impact of the current financial crisis and what could eventually happen to us. And I have to make that information available to as many people as I can. What I said initially at the UNL Faculty Senate was, I'm not convinced we can cut our way out of this fiscal crisis. The fiscal crisis, as it's been explained to me and as others have talked about, is not just this year, or maybe not even next year. It is longer term. I've seen projections that the deficit for the next biennium might be as much as $400 to $600 million. The university receives about 15% of the state general fund dollars. If $400 million is the next target to cut, that would be $60 million out of our budget. I can guarantee you that with that size of a cut, very bad things will happen to the university. We simply can't sustain. What you've seen now will be multiplied many-fold. I don't see any way to keep undertaking those same kinds of cuts and maintain an institution like anything at all like what we have today.
Do we have too many campuses?
No. We have campuses with different missions and different priorities. As you yourself pointed out, UNO is an urban university which has a different kind of mission than UNL. UNK has yet a different mission. The three jointly provide an outstanding opportunity for virtually all Nebraskans. The medical center is an academic health sciences center. In that respect, it's unique and isn't duplicated anywhere else. So you have 4 campuses. We're one of the few states, in point of fact, we may be the only one, I should look that up, which has a single public university. Iowa State, the state of Iowa has 3, the state of Colorado has 2, the state of Kansas has 2.
You mean taking a system approach and trying to be
Well, there's
complementary?
Kansas and Kansas State, and each of them have additional satellite campuses. I don't think you can solve the problem by eliminating one of the campuses.
But a summit, do you think, why don't you call a summit?
I have. A summit works only when people respond to your request.
True.
My suggestion was that we all get together, the business community, government, higher education, K-12, and let's discuss where we are and how we get out of this. If revenue is the problem, let's look at our whole structure. Do we need to change dramatically the kind of taxes we take in and how we deal with them? If spending is the problem, let's take a look at our priorities.
Many years
What
ago,
are the top priorities?
Many years ago, there was a post-secondary, I guess, committee or think tank of the state or citizens of the state, and I don't recall specifically what they came up with or if anybody followed their recommendations. But maybe the time has come for something, as you say.
I think we're past the time where we can simply react on an annual basis. So some longer-term strategy, at least from my perspective, would seem to be important.
Well, you're not out of the woods yet. We've got more of the legislature and to go, so I wish you the best, and I want to thank you for joining us today. Eldena Smith, Dr. Eldena Smith, President of the University of Nebraska System. I want to remind you that you can see this show on the internet and all our past shows at unotv.unomaha.edu. President Smith was nice enough to come. Always glad to have you on the UNO campus.
Thank you.
Sir.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Consider This.
This program is made possible in part by Nebraskans for Public Television.